Hello and welcome to today's video. I'm Will Girling, sports and performance nutritionist, and today we are talking about race day nutrition. Today's video is part 2 in a 2-part series talking about race day nutrition. So if you haven't checked out part 1, there is a link in the corner right now. But let's get into part 2 and talk about the day of your race. The day of your race starts obviously with that pre-race meal. Now, the pre-race meal is going to start 2 to 4 hours before the start of your race. This varies purely from personal perspective. Personally, I like 2 hours. It makes me feel really good. I like it a little bit closer to the event, but I know some people are a bit slow digesting and would prefer 3 or 4 hours before the start of the race. It also depends on what time your race is, because if it is really early, you may not have the luxury of 4 hours. But with many Ironman races and similar, they do have you signing in and doing things really early, and you might have to get down there. The amount you want for your pre-race meal 2 to 4 hours beforehand is between 1.2 grams per kilogram body weight to 2.4 grams. The amount depends on how big your race is, how well your carb load went, and once again on personal preference. But at minimum, 1.2 grams is what I'd recommend to help resaturate and refill your liver glycogen. Because after a night of sleeping, your liver glycogen will be empty. What does that meal look like? Well, that meal wants to be made up of low to moderate GI because it does impact the speed at which we use carbohydrate. If you have high GI carbohydrates, it does seem to mean that we burn our carbohydrate sources a bit quicker during the race. We want to have some protein because it's going to help with recovery and it's going to help with not suppressing the immune system as much if you are doing a really big race, like an Ironman or something of similar duration/intensity. We don't want fat to be too high because we don't want to slow down digestion. It's going to add calories that aren't going to add any effectiveness to the race. So just keep it more incidental or on the lower side. The other thing that we really want in that meal is some form of fructose. Fructose obviously primarily comes from fruit and other sources, but because liver glycogen is empty, fructose directly goes into the liver first and will help replenish it a bit quicker. We don't want too much though, because too much fructose can cause GI distress. So just a moderate amount. What this might look like for a 70 kilo male or female, if you're doing 1.2 grams per kilogram body weight, it could be a 60-gram bowl of porridge with a banana and a couple of tablespoons of maple syrup. It could be 2 slices of bread with a banana between to make a banana sandwich with some honey and a glass of fruit juice. We want to keep this meal low in fiber so we're not filling ourselves up too much, especially when we spend the last few days following a low fiber diet. What else do we want to go along with that meal 2 to 4 hours beforehand? A small coffee with caffeine will improve our absorption rate of carbohydrate. And obviously hydrating, especially if you're in a hot country and you've been sweating during your sleep. Next, we have the 2-hour mark. This may coincide with some of you, but if you had 3 or 4 hours beforehand, this is a time where we're going to take on nitrates, 400 milligrams, and is our last intake in our nitrate loading before our race. And then once again, hydrating. We're going to be having another sports bottle of water, potentially with electrolyte, if you are a particularly salty sweater. I'm wondering what you got for me. Egyptian cutter is out to be my lady on me. 1 hour before the race. This is where we have our caffeine. Orally ingested caffeine takes 1 hour to peak in the blood. So you want to be starting that race as it's peaking. You can optionally take it 30 to 45 minutes before. So as you have begun, it is then starting to peak. Performance enhancing amounts are larger than just a single coffee, and I will be doing a video on caffeine. And obviously, once again, hydrating. You only need to do this now if you are still not passing clearly when you go to the toilet. But if you're still passing cloudy or with a dark yellow color in your urine, then it might be worthwhile having another bottle of water, possibly with more electrolyte. At this point, it does come down to a little bit of preference, but ensuring you're starting that race in a hydrated state is really important. At 20 minutes or less, we're purely looking at our last minute snacks. This is where you could be having something like another banana, a slice of bread and jam, a piece of fruit in general or dried fruit, a bar, a gel, your preference. It's completely up to you. It is your race. So something that's going to make you feel good and just finally topping up those levels. Why we have it 20 minutes or less before the start? Well, carbohydrate takes 15 minutes to peak in the blood. So especially if it's easier digesting food. So the last thing we want is your blood sugar levels rising and then coming back down as we start activity. This is something that's called rebound hypoglycemia, and you may have heard of it before. I could do a video on that and talk about how specifically that could affect your races. If you'd like to know more about that, drop a comment down below. When we're looking at how much we want to have in your race, it depends on the duration. But the longer the duration, the more we want to have per hour. So if you're going for anything that's like 4 hours or longer, we're definitely looking more towards that 80, 90, possibly more grams per hour. If you're a female, this is going to probably be about 10 grams lower than that, because females tend to oxidize fat more efficiently than males do. And there doesn't seem to be a relationship between more carbohydrate being taken on and faster finishing times in women. Comparatively low, men have faster finishing times with more carbohydrate eaten per hour. This is really interesting, and I think if you are a female looking at this, it might be worth looking at. But overall, you want to be pushing that amount to the highest you can. And obviously this starts with you practicing in the weeks leading up. About 4 to 6 weeks of race day nutrition practice, and practicing the amount you're going to have per hour is imperative to your performance and how you're going to feel on the day. Once again, that amount is going to vary between around 60 grams an hour all the way up to 90, possibly more grams per hour. How you take that on, I've done another video on this, so maybe there'll be another icon in the corner. You want to be taking on a mixture of food that makes you feel good, that you enjoy, and has a mixture of flavors. Palate fatigue over long duration events can cause GI distress on its own, even if you're following the rules of how much to eat per hour. So getting a mixture of liquids, semi-solids, like gels if you want, and solids are the best way to go around it. Making your own can really help, like rice cakes or your own flapjacks and things like this. So you finish your race, you've got all the glory, you feel great about it, maybe you've even got a medal, maybe you haven't, but you've still done your best. If you aren't racing again the next day, then all you need to do is follow your normal post-workout routine, taking on some protein if you need to, and maybe some carbohydrates to help replenish your carbohydrate stores and to help also with recovery. This can be whatever you want it to be, and just enjoy it. You've earned it. But if you are racing again, then we have a few things to follow. This is something called glycogen resynthesis protocol, or that's what I call it anyway. And this is where we're trying to maximize the amount of carbohydrate going into the body and then into the muscle. Because you carb loaded for that day, and if you've got to race again, you need to carb load after you've already raced. To do this, you want to maximize the next 1 to 4 hours after the race, taking on 1.2 grams per kilogram body weight of carbohydrate again. You do that per hour for up to 4 hours. That could be quite a lot of carbohydrate, so making sure you get the right choices is important. This time, high GI carbohydrate is the ideal, and it is important. Comparing high GI to low GI will be the difference between storing enough and not enough. Obviously, having protein in that first meal straight afterwards will also improve your recovery. Obviously, how much you need really depends on how big that next day is. If we look at some of the guys I've worked with in the Giro and the Vuelta, if they're doing a really, really big day, but then they've got a really easy day, that's a flat stage, then you obviously don't need as much, and you can lower the amount. But if you're doing a big day into a big day, then you need to make sure you're having that every hour for that 4 hours. You'll know if you've got it wrong because if you wake up the next day and you happen to have some scales with you, or you purposely brought them or not, if you weigh yourself and you have massively gained in weight, then you have probably eaten too much. If you've weighed about the same, you've probably got it bang on. And if you're massively under on weight, then you probably haven't had enough. But don't worry, if you haven't had enough, you've still got that breakfast and those pre-race meals where you can have that larger amount, edging more towards that 2.4 grams that I mentioned earlier. And that's pretty much it. That is everything you need to do to make sure you have the best race possible, going from the week leading up and the carb load the day before, and then pre-race, during your race, and after that race to make sure you're getting the most out of it. And that's everything you need to do for race day nutrition. If you really enjoyed today's video, drop a comment down below. I do love reading your comments and hearing what you guys thought about the video and how much you enjoyed it, or maybe the things that you do yourself. As always, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, especially if you're a new viewer and you haven't done so yet. But other than that, tune in again for more nutrition, for more science, and learning how you can manage your race day or your events. Remember guys, fuel for the work required, and I'll speak to you guys soon. Bye.
I'm wondering what you got for me. Egyptian cotton, it's hard to